gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that.
Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're taking marketing lessons from the book Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, with the help of our special guest, SVP of Marketing at Flexera. Leslie, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Wonderful to have you on the show. Excited to chat marketing and content, all the cool stuff you're doing at Flexera. But first, why the heck did you pick Predictably Irrational?
Well, this is a book that I fell in love with early in my career, and I'm a little bit of a nerd. I didn't kind of start off in the marketing world. I actually went to engineering school, and I somehow stumbled my way over into marketing. And I realized in business school that so many disciplines cross over. And the thing that I love about Predictably Irrational is that it spoke to me, because when I went to economics class in B school, I was like, this entire framework of economics that we're learning assumes that people are rational. That is just fundamentally supply, demand, rationality are related. And that's just not how people work. Somebody must figure this out. And Dan Ariely wrote out about that.
Think about a piece of chocolate. It's melting in your mouth. You feel it, you smell it, you taste it. There's a little nut inside. In standard economic lingo, you should have a reservation price. You should have the maximum willingness to pay for this particular experience. But if you reflect on it and you say, how do I actually do it? How do I take this experience and translate it into money? You would realize that it's in fact a very hard exercise, and it's completely unclear how we map pleasure onto money.
And before we get all into that book, tell us what it means to be SVP of Marketing at Flexera.
Well, I'm in the very fortunate position of being able to lead the marketing team and strategy for Flexera. It's a B2B organization targeting IT, predominantly IT buyers and FinOps personas. We are helping organizations get control of their technology spend and the risk associated with that, which is a big problem a lot of organizations have, especially with AI exploding now.
Meredith, what the heck is Predictably Irrational?
So Predictably Irrational is a book by Dan Ariely, like we mentioned. And I was looking into his background. He is, by title, a behavioral economist, and he teaches at Duke University.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
And I was like, what is that exactly? So it's somebody who studies how psychological factors like emotions and biases affect our economic choices. And there's a theory in sort of traditional economics called the rational actor model. And that theory says that people are rational beings and they try to achieve their goals in as efficient a manner as possible. But behavioral economics sort of deviates from that in that they acknowledge that people aren't always rational.
I like behavioral economics because it's really studying ourselves. It's really fascinating that we can look at our day-to-day behavior and the kind of little things that we do every day, like buying a cup of coffee or driving too fast and so on, and learn something new about it is really exciting. And then on top of that, I'm hoping and optimistic that if we understand those things better, we can actually suggest some ways to improve and actually better ourselves and the human condition.
Dan Ariely wrote Predictably Irrational based on that in 2008. And it's a book that really challenges people to question how they make decisions. He said it's about breaking through these systematic patterns of thought to make better decisions. So not only is it sort of acknowledging folks aren't rational, but it's also like sort of trying to help people acknowledge that, be aware of patterns, and then think about how they can make better decisions. But what was funny is he wasn't ever really planning on writing this book. He actually wanted to write a cookbook. And the two seem so not connected at all, but it's just interesting because his idea was he wanted to write a cookbook called Dining Without Crumbs, The Art of Eating Over the Sink, but he couldn't find an agent. And the folks he was talking to, they were like, well, if you're serious about writing the cookbook, you have to first publish something else. So just get your name out there, get published. And the easiest way, the really only way he saw forward was publishing his research findings, because that's sort of what was available to him. It's what he had. It's what his expertise was. But he didn't want it to be academic. He wanted it really to be for the general public. And so that's when he wrote this book. And he actually first became interested in human behavior when he was recovering from injuries he sustained in this explosion accident when he was serving in the Israeli military. He was in the hospital for 3 years. And during that time, he just sort of turned inward. He became really introspective. He was thinking about his own psychology and why people behave the way they do. But a big part of that was how the nurses were treating him as he was recovering. He ended up having burns over 70% of his body. I saw a video of him doing a speaking engagement, and he had a beard, but it was only on half of his face. And I was like, what's the story here? And it's because of his burns and this injury that he sustained. But so the nurses who were taking care of him had to change out his bandages every day. And they said that it would be less painful if they just did it quickly, took off the old bandages quickly, and then put on new ones. And he was like, can you go slower? It really hurts. And he was sort of advocating for them to slow down. And so they insisted if we do it fast, sort of rip the Band-Aid off, basically, it wouldn't be that bad. And so when he got out of the hospital, he ended up going to college at Tel Aviv University, and he took a class on physiology of the brain. And that's when he was thinking about this, and he decided to conduct an experiment on pain to see if the nurses were right or wrong. And of course, he proved them wrong. He took his findings back to the nurses that treated him, and he was like, look at what I found. And they, even so, given that, they refused to change how they were treating patients, which is awful. But he said, doing this experiment, doing all of this studying, he said it profoundly changed my outlook on research and largely determined my future. So to go back to the book, Ariely writes, as the results presented in this book show, we are all far less rational in our decision-making. And he, again, sort of referring back to the nurses, he says, they were being irrational in their decision-making on how to treat him, even given the evidence, that they were wrong. So he says, we're all far less rational in our decision-making than standard economic theory assumes. Our irrational behaviors are neither random nor senseless. They're systematic and predictable. We all make the same types of mistakes over and over because of the basic wiring of our brains.
Most of the mistakes I still do. These are just very hard things to overcome. But there are a few things that I put particular effort to try and overcome, that I try to limit. And it's not easy, but sometimes it is possible.
So wouldn't it make sense to modify standard economics and move away from naive psychology, which often fails the tests of reason, introspection, and empirical scrutiny? And so I thought that was a really interesting quote. But Leslie, I'm wondering sort of how you're tying this to marketing, when we think about irrational behavior and, the sort of getting folks' attention and tuning into the way psychologically people are making decisions.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Before we get to that.
Yes.
So he didn't write the Dining Without Crumbs book?
I don't
think
believe
so.
Which actually, I
want to read that.
So. I think he just... It sounds good, right?
It's the best. The Art of Eating Over the Sink.
Yeah.
That's the best subtitle ever.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he wrote that, but he's still writing. He's still coming out with new books. But this one I still keep going back to because, to answer your question, Meredith, behavioral economics is essentially neuromarketing, right? There's a whole trend out there around neuromarketing and understanding how to kind of hack people's brains to be able to market to them and sell to them effectively. And, the key to what Ariely was talking about is, although we are irrational, again, it's these predictable patterns. So if we understand those predictable patterns, we can take advantage of them. You also hear about neurohacking. We learn about unconscious biases. We hear about heuristics. These are all principles that he covers in his book. And yes, it's contextualized in terms of behavioral economics, but you can very easily translate that into marketing lessons.
Yeah, like taking advantage of folks' patterns and behaviors and things like that. Yeah, that's exactly it.
One of the big things for B2B marketing is this sort of like insistence that a large group of buyers or a large group of people who represent one organizational buyer are going to do the thing that is most rational. And like over and over and over again, you find that that's not actually the case, that people buy in big groups, in big cohorts for all sorts of different reasons. Some of those are like intended or unintended consequences of your product. But another thing there is that they behave irrationally quite often, which is why marketing works in some ways. And also marketing is designed to deliver the value. But it reminds me, I just, there's just this post about sort of like basically how hard marketing is these days and how, product is back to being king. And it's like, good product is always super important. Of course, that's the case. But that's kind of extremely reductive because if great product was always the thing that won in a world that's increasingly commoditized, then everyone would just buy the top-rated product, right? That's like, you would never buy the product that wasn't top-rated, but there's other reasons why people buy. And therein lies the power of marketing, is to figure out the other reasons why people buy and get that message to them so that they can do that.
I totally agree. In fact, I can't tell you how many times I'll hear from a seller, a customer who was with a competitor of ours is at the table now talking to us because the competitor ticked them off, right? Yeah. It wasn't that the product didn't work. It was, we're mad at them. We want to talk to you. Sometimes that plays out in our favor. Sometimes it just, we're getting used. But yeah, people make decisions that are based on more than just the very practical realities of, the product, the economics, whatever.
Well, I think that things like that are, like the lie that you tell yourself there is, well, if they treated me like this, then this must be systemic. This must be built into the product somehow. This must be in the roadmap. This must be like, yeah, I'm mad at this one thing, but if this is happening to me in this way, then isn't it like all like that? Like if you take a ride on Uber and you have a horrible experience on Uber because, the driver was a jerk, you're like, well, probably all the drivers on this platform are jerks because they hire jerks, even though that's completely irrational.
Well, Ian, what you have just talked about is what Ariely talks about, which is the effect of expectations. So this is the idea that when we believe something is good, everything about it is good. When we believe something is bad, it's likely to be bad. And that ties into also things like the halo effect. So these are very interlocking, overlapping principles. But, this is why brand is so important. People need to know who you are, know what you do, and believe that it's good for them to even entertain the idea of validating that the product itself is actually good.
Yeah, and I want to dig into all the three big marketing lessons from this one at a time. But can you sum up the three of them really quick?
Sure. So there's many lessons, but the ones that I like most, that I think are most applicable, are the effect of expectations, which we just talked about. This is believing beforehand something is good, therefore it will be, or the reverse. The paradox of choice, which is if you actually want to give people fewer options and take control of the options that they see. People have too many options. If you give people the Cheesecake Factory of a menu of options, that actually is not generally a good thing. And the third one is kind of two together, which is the power of free and loss aversion. This is the idea that people will overvalue something that's free and ignore kind of the trade-off costs associated. And loss is psychologically painful. We don't want to lose that which we already have.
Fantastic. We're going to dig into each of these. So you talked expectations. How can a marketer think about the effect of expectations?
Well, I think that it comes down to talking about your brand in a positive way, telling people very explicitly what is good, what they should think, how they should feel. And I know that that sounds a little bit pedantic and maybe even obvious, but a lot of times marketers try to get a little too cute and a little too fancy, and they hope that people will read between the lines. And you can't afford that most of the time. People's energy, attention is being drawn in many different directions. So you need to find a way to, emotionally stimulate this feeling of goodness associated with your brand as often as possible, for those who matter to you.
Yeah. And an example of this would be like all of Nike's marketing, right? I don't think that I'm going to be Tiger Woods or Serena Williams or, whoever, but if somebody who's that great at sport is wearing Nike, then, at a minimum, I'll be a little bit better at sport if I'm wearing Nike.
That's exactly right. It's showing people what good looks like that they can aspire to. It's positive affirmations and statements like, just do it. That's very empowering. Nike's a great example of that. And there's many organizations that lean into that power of positivity. And this is the reason why. What's very interesting is that consumer brands do this a lot, very, very well.
Yep.
B2B organizations tend to do almost the opposite. They tend to lean more into FUD. And that's a harder road to tread, actually.
Yep. We're already afraid, right? FUD meaning fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like we already know the downside. We know you can get fired. We know sometimes you can go to jail. We know that there's significant downsides to our actions. Is that really going to change our behavior? Right.
Right.
If everybody knows that you can, get a DUI if you drink and drive. People know the downside. They absolutely know that. And they choose to do things otherwise. So I agree. I think, fear can be a powerful motivator. FOMO can be a powerful motivator. But FOMO works not because you're afraid of missing out. That's part of it. But the other part of it is that how good it's going to be when you're there, right? It's the party's going to be so fun.
Right.
That if you don't go, you want to go. That's really, it says fear, but it's actually about wanting to be there, the place that you don't miss the fun.
Yep, that's exactly right. But I think a lot of times marketers get that wrong.
Yeah. So what are some other, what are ways that B2B companies could look at that piece of it?
Well, I truly, if you're an organization that is, selling software, the software is designed to provide a business outcome. It's designed to solve a business problem. Instead of focusing on, here's the business problem, doesn't that suck for you? You can say, here's the solution. You have the power. You can feel, confident about your ability to achieve X, Y, Z because you've solved this problem. It's saying the same thing, but orienting it in a positive way and being very, very, very consistent in that message. Beat that drum over and over and over again. Another thing consumer organizations do really, really well, you see the same ads over and over and over again. TikTok has decided all of a sudden I'm interested in NADs. Guess what? I get everywhere. And eventually it's probably going to work, right?
Right. Yeah, I would add one to that customer stories for this is so important because that's how you show someone else did it. They are happy, right? This person has given you the access. They've given you their story. They've allowed you to spread the gospel. They're letting you showcase them. And if they got it that good, then you better believe that you can too.
That's exactly right. I mean, customer stories every time and everything you do all the way, as many as you can get. I'll take a customer quote, even if it's anonymous, because it's that much more powerful than saying something about ourselves.
I would go one step further than that. I would take a customer quote that says absolutely nothing, as long as it has a positive take on it of just great. Like, can we throw an exclamation point on there? You know what I mean? Like, you think of a movie trailer, hilarious, groundbreaking, incredible, a triumph. That's just single words or 2 words. You know what I mean? That's
true.
good enough. That's infinitely better than you saying it yourself.
Yep. And you're going to go into that movie expecting that it's going to be all those things.
Yeah. And you're going to deliver. Okay, number 2, paradox of choice.
So paradox of choice, again, this is about giving people fewer options, not every single scenario. So, you think about this in several ways. When you explain a product, we all know that one product that we sell, especially if you're in like software, let's say, is actually multiple products. If you were to ask an engineer, there's 27 products in that product.
Yep.
But for the customer, it's one solution. Make it really simple. And if you can take it further and package things together, all the better. And we'll talk about packaging in a minute. But the other thing that you need to do very practically, and this makes some people very, very uncomfortable, is narrow down the competitive options for them. Your sales process will move faster. You will be able to take better control of the narrative if you say, this is us, and these are the 2 other vendors that look like us. And here's why, we are different and better. And here's what you can expect from these guys. And that doesn't mean saying negative things about them. It's just highlighting your strengths and your virtues. And by doing that, you're making the customer focus on a narrower set of things rather than, them just going to ChatGPT or Google and getting the laundry list of every vendor that has something relevant to the type of thing that you're offering. Because they might come up with options that you didn't even think of or that you don't know about or that you couldn't defend against in the best possible way. And it takes longer because they got more things to go vet.
You've heard the phrase, if you can't get a seat at the table, build the table. Well, if you need to get on the slide, make the slide. Say,
that's right.
Hey, here's behemoth company A, massive conglomerate B, little tiny company us. Here's who you should be comparing us against. Like, these are the 3 options.
That's right.
Give them the slide. That's the same slide. Hopefully that they're, make it unbranded. Say, hey, you can use this exact same slide on your deck. Make it a little bit easier.
Yep. That's exactly right.
That's pretty scary though, Leslie. I don't think a lot of people do that.
I know. There's tons of research out there repeatedly that actually supports that it's better to just get up front as early as possible, position yourself against the competitor. It will move things along. It'll also give the customer confidence that you understand the market.
Yeah, I think also too, for someone like us, Caffeine's a creative studio that, makes all sorts of podcasts and video and other type of projects, some of which are crazy, some are not. And our biggest competitor, we have people who we lose deals to all the time, but also make it in-house, right? Like, we did a build or buy worksheet years ago, which I don't trot that out enough, where it's like, this is exactly how you would build the same thing that we're going to build you in-house. This is exactly what you would need to do it. Here's a proposed budget. Here's how I would go about it. Here's how you could hire contractors from these places. We haven't done this. I should probably do this. But really paint the picture of, this is option A. And if you want to go with option A, go with that. And we're option B. And if you want all that stuff taken off your plate and you want to work with a creative partner, the one thing, I'll say this to you, and I'm curious to your thoughts on this, is one of the problems that we have, and I think that other people probably have a similar problem, is that the number one differentiator when we ask our customers why they chose us is that we're more creative. But A, they don't necessarily want to say that on record. B, us saying we're more creative is not hey, we're more creative. What does that mean? You know what I mean? And so when you're talking about something like that, and I know this sort of gets into like positioning and things like that, but it's just, I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because you need to make comparative statements that can be substantiated or are so unique to you that there's no way to make a reasonable comparison. So I don't think you could say that. But you could say something like, customers repeatedly value our creativity or something like that. So you bring it, you orient it back to, the customer, but it's not about it's not about relativity at that point. It's not about you relative to the others, but it's about a virtue that you, or a quality that you guys embody that customers appreciate.
Yeah, maybe that's the way to position is say, hey, we asked customers to say why they chose us. We did a survey of our customers, and here's the reasons why they chose us, and use that rather than saying, having the three things of the bullet points on your website. Instead of using that, just say, hey, we polled our customers. This is why they chose us,
Yep, exactly. I would say that you can use the same principles on paradox of choices. You don't want the reasons that people choose you to be a laundry list, an exhaustive list. You want to kind of highlight and hit hard on a few. Yeah. Same principle.
Well, that's the reason why I say it, because when we originally did our positioning and we were thinking about, okay, we want to give people the three reasons, why Caspian, and we came up with a list of three, and then we asked our customers, and then they chose one that wasn't on our list. And you're like, that
is a great example for why you should always validate with customers. Always.
Yeah, because we felt that way. We're like, we feel like we're pretty darn creative, the most creative who can even tell what that means. But anyways, but the same thing with giving people fewer options is I have to have a reason for them to say, to choose us, and it's like that, what's the thing that is going to stick with them? And some people have super creative projects and some people have super not as creative projects, but they still want a super creative partner. And that's something I didn't realize, going into this years and years and years ago, is like that someone would choose a ridiculously creative agency to make a project that is not super creative. And that's, again, anyways, but I think to solidify sort of your point here is that giving them fewer options to then take back to their team. Like, hey, why'd you choose them? Oh, well, people like that they're more creative, and that's what their customers say, and that's why we went with them.
Yep. And by the way, who's been taking advantage of this exact principle for a long time? The analysts. Whatever you think about, like the Gartner Magic Quadrants and the Forrester Waves and all those things, what they do is they give people a short list to start from, and they like that.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's, if you're in the quadrant, or if you're in the, whatever, you have a 10x time better making it on the slide when you get pitched to leadership. And there's the first slide, which has all the people, and then there's we narrowed it down to 3, and that's where you got to be.
Exactly. So try to do that for them.
Speaking of 3, number 3, the power of free plus loss aversion.
Mm-hmm. So people will overvalue that which they already have. And the best way to explain this is if you were to buy a ticket, this was an actual study that was done about basketball tickets. But if you were to be offered the opportunity to buy tickets to a basketball game, the amount of money that you'd be willing to pay, let's say that it's $150. But if you already had tickets to this basketball game and for some reason you can't go, and now you need to sell these tickets, people tended to expect to receive more than the value they would have been willing to pay for the tickets because they already have them. So there's this interesting inherent value in the thing that they already own. So that's like the loss aversion piece of it. The free piece of it is interesting too, because people are willing to accept trade-offs for something that is perceived to be free. So you are given the option of paying a dime for a Lindor truffle or get a free Hershey Kiss. One of those is objectively better chocolate, but you're going to go for most people are going to go for the free Hershey Kiss, even though a dime is a really negligible amount of money. They're trading off quality because free seems to be very valuable. So let's pull that into what that means in the world of marketing. This is the exact reason that PLG, product-led growth, is so powerful. Because if you can get people in the door with some sort of freemium offering, people will actually work harder to do the legwork to get a free product to work and interact with it than they might be willing to put in for something that they have to go pay for. And then once they have it, and they've put in the work, they don't want to lose it. Right. So a very good case for PLG, but you could extend that principle even if the product that you have doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. Amazon does this with free shipping, right? The perceived value of free is so tremendous that you're going to pay for this membership over here. You could do the math. You might not, well, depend if you're getting Amazon or delivery every day, maybe you're winning. But
I think that Amazon has figured it out that
totally. They've totally figured it out. So we see these applications all over the place on the B2B and the B2C side, free trials and things like that. There's a reason that those things work. And I think marketers could be doing more to take advantage of getting stuff in the hands of people. And especially if you broaden the aperture of what you think about making available for free. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, perhaps. But, even when it comes to getting content in people's hands, giving them the content for free instead of gating it, there's value there.
Yeah, there's a lot of value there. That's why we create the vast majority of the content that we create for our customers is free. And I think this is super interesting. So one of the things that I was thinking about for this is sort of this AI race that we're in the middle of. And there's a million things that we could talk about here, but I just want to talk about the power of free for a second and loss aversion and like learning to use Claude or ChatGPT or whichever is or Perplexity, your version of choice. And I think I've upgraded, I don't know how many I pay for now, probably at least 5 different AI tools, which are so cheap. I mean, they're incredibly cheap, right? For the amount of, value that you get. But also there's, an understanding of there's tons and tons of people that are probably going to be free forever on those platforms. My point being that the loss aversion piece is I quote unquote learned how to use ChatGPT. That the switching cost, which is 0 to switch to a different platform, but the time that you've spent in it keeps you there, which is fascinating because then you really get into like first to contact, first to contract type stuff where it's like, what is the value for the AI tool that you're using? What is the utility that you're trying to get out of it? Is it purpose made for that? Because I think there's sort of this large idea, which again, we don't need to get into all of the economics of AI tools, but the idea that there's like these, mega tools and well, how could there be, all these other tools, but you're like, when there's the AI app for dentists and you're a dentist and that's better than just using the AI app that's for everything and for everybody. Once you start using that freemium version, the loss aversion, what you're saying is that the loss of no longer using it and finding something else is going to be strong.
That's right. Even if the product itself, as you said, is not inherently sticky, it's not even the most unique thing. It might not even be the best thing, but you've invested psychologically your time, your energy in learning how to use it. Maybe you started with it being free, then you unlocked the paid capabilities of it. And now you're like, oh shoot, I don't want to lose those things. I'll have to find a way to replace what I could do and figure out a new way to do it again. And, there's plenty of people out there who are just so technologically inclined that they have no issue jumping around. But that's not most people. Most people, once they get comfortable with something and it's working for them, there's a reason. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That adage exists for a reason. And that's because most people behave that way. So people like what they've got. And if they know how to use it and you don't, going back to the other thing, tick them off, then there's a lot more psychologically at stake in making a change than the economics of it.
Yeah. And basically where I think that PLG companies potentially sometimes go wrong is that enterprise value is very different from user value. So
yes. Oh, yes.
Because I love using blank tool, Meredith doesn't. So if Meredith and my boss tells us, hey, you both need to use tool blank because we purchased an enterprise license, then it's, well, my decision is made for me. And now all of a sudden, even though, all of those things, now I'm off. Whereas if it's each of us can just swipe a credit card and pay for our tools individually, and there's no sort of enterprise governance, then all of a sudden you have something that could be incredibly sticky within organizations. But this is why a bunch of PLG tools, why they had to build enterprise sales teams, was because in order to sell an enterprise license, this rule actually works against you. Because if I'm using one productivity tool, Meredith is using one productivity tool, you need someone up high to say use both. Otherwise, there's loss aversion that is actually working against your PLG motion.
Yep, you know what? And this is a story that we see over and over and over again. And it's not even just in PLG. It's any product. And, I'll talk about technology, keep talking about technology, any technology that is predominantly consumed, the users of that technology day in and day out are, relatively low in the organization or relatively niche within an organization, because there's, somebody else who is the economic decision maker who is not the user. And, they're going to be making economics-based decisions and not, be the ones who are affected by all these other principles. It's a tricky place to be.
It is tricky, and that's what's fun. Okay, not any other. Okay, what are some ways to operate? What are some ways to operationalize these takeaways? What can people do?
Yeah, okay, so just, really quick to recap, tell people something is good. Be explicit and, lean into the power of positivity, because when people approach you, your brand, your product with positive thinking, they believe it will be good, and they're more likely to feel that it is. Number 2, tell people who your competitors are. Limit their choices for them and take control of the competitive conversation. As scary as that is, you cannot pretend the competitors don't exist, so take control. And number 3, think about the power of PLG or experiences that are PLG if your product doesn't inherently lend itself to that, which means get somebody feeling some level of sense of accountability or connectivity to your offering so that they feel the loss of it if that is not the path you go down. I'll give you a practical example for something that is where the product doesn't lend itself to PLG. If your technology there's no freemium scenario, your technology truly is a more complex, hands-on, longer sales transaction type of thing, then you can get people feeling more connected to your solution early in the process by being the advisor that they're relying on early in the sales process. So a good way to do this is give them the RFP template that allows you to set the requirements and already start thinking about your solution kind of inherently being the leader, because you know that it'll match the requirements. It's a little bit old school, in fact, but it still works.
That's great. All right. Any other thoughts on the book or on any of this?
Well, if one of the things that we talked about previously, I don't know if you want to go into this idea of cognitive dissonance. This is not really a heuristic or an implicit bias that you take advantage of. But, one thing that we're definitely seeing, and look, people behave this way all the time. The idea of cognitive dissonance is there are inherent contradictions in our thought processes and our behaviors and the way we think about different things. And for a very long time, we saw a lot of differences in buying behaviors between the way people make choices as consumers and the way they make choices as business professionals. And a lot of it had to do with what you were talking about earlier, Ian, which is this idea of there's an entire buying group generally. When you're talking about, selling and marketing into an enterprise, for example, there's 6 to 12 people involved in the process. And that lends itself to a very different buying type experience, and it almost allows the emotional aspects of decision making to be filtered out, or at least it used to. That like dissonance gap seems to be closing, and that's been happening for a long time. But COVID definitely accelerated that, and I know that it feels like it's 5 years post COVID. Are we still talking about that? Well, we are, because all of a sudden, and still today, more people are working from their homes. They're working from the same devices in the same physical spaces. as they are buying their personal stuff. They might even be doing it at the same time, buying their, or placing whatever thing they're ordering online the same time that they're researching stuff that they want to buy. And what that is resulting in is people are expecting to interact with brands and purchase experiences more like they are in their personal lives, whether they realize it or not. So we all expect to have what I would refer to as ambient personalization in our marketing experiences. You don't want it to be creepy. You don't want it to be like, hey, Ian, hey, Meredith. Maybe you do, but most people probably that's a step too far. But what you do want is that the things that are being advertised to you are contextually relevant to you. And even if you feel like you don't want to give up the privacy and, give up the personal data it takes to have that experience, most people actually do want that, because when you get an ad for something that's irrelevant, we're almost like offended now. We're like, why would they think I want this? Right? It used to be kind of a shot in the dark combined with demographics. Now it's a lot more specific, and people want that. People also expect to be able to do as much of the buying process as they personally desire on their own. They want self-guided experiences. They also want to be able to just be like, you do the work for me. I want to talk to a salesperson. But lots and lots of people want to be able to find all the information. So if you go online and you can't find a demo of the product, if you can't find what does this thing integrate with, if you can't find what are all the ways I might be able to buy this, that's annoying nowadays. It used to be perfectly acceptable for you to be like, okay, I'm going to fill in this form and a salesperson's going to call me and answer all my questions. The other thing is people don't want to give up their personal information without a really, really good reason. And I think that people have a much lower tolerance than ever before for things like gated content. They want things to be fast, easy, frictionless. And so if they come up against a barrier, oh, that looks really interesting. I do want that, whatever, ebook. But then a forum pops up, you're like, I'm out. I'll go find this from somebody else. ChatGPT will be able to get behind that and summarize it for me.
Yeah.
So, we have to evolve the way that we market to appreciate those changes.
What about the emotional side of B2B decision making? I know we touched on this a little bit, but any other thoughts of what a marketing team could do to sort of understand the emotional state of people and market more effectively?
Yeah. So let's start by assuming that people's emotional state is generally neutral and open to being manipulated one way or another. Okay. Now, in a business context, maybe somebody got yelled at by their boss because they weren't, productive enough for using AI or whatever. So now they're going off and doing research and they're very emotional about it in that moment. But generally, let's assume people's starting point is not inherently emotional, but they certainly can become emotional very, very easily.
So when we did our lead form, I don't know if it still has this, I'd have to check, but our lead form for Caspian, hey, do you want to work with Caspian? We have a drop-down menu of basically like, do you want to make a video series? Do you want to make a podcast? And it says, I want to make a podcast series. I want to make a video series. I want to make fiction content. And one of the drop-down is my boss told me, or my boss wants to do this. And it's sort of like a, pick all or whatever, or pick as many as you want. And it's crazy how many people put that just their boss told them to do this.
Yeah.
And like when you think about like the mindset in that sort of first conversation, and then also I think we had in there like, I have an idea for what I want to build. I have no idea what I want to build. Like all of those things really help anticipate the mindset of the person coming into this. I think we also have like, I know nothing about podcasts originally, but those little things like really made a huge difference that we could go into the call and really be a lot more informed about, the impetus for, how emotional they are in the moment, right? Someone has, I've had this idea for 10 years. And then, there's a comments box. I've had this idea for a show for 10 years. And like, I've just always wanted to make it. I'm finally at a company where I can actually make it. And I just need a partner that I can bring this thing to life. And I have it scoped out versus like, my boss says we need more video content, like looking for vendors,
Yep. Yeah, actually, I love that that's an option, and it doesn't surprise me at all that it's commonly selected. And so the way that we talked about FOMO, we talked about FUD. We see that there's a lot of marketers who prey on the emotional state. And look, when you're doing marketing in the B2B context, nobody is like sitting there at their computer, feeling sad because they have FOMO, but you can stoke it very easily. There's also tactics like negging that has come out. I'm just like so anti all of these things. I think there's a way to be positive about every single thing that you want to say. And as FOMO, FUD, or negging, you could say in a positive way that shows people how they have the potential to feel good. Because when you're stoking and you're trying to get people into an emotional state, what you're trying to do is show them the good feeling they can get out of your offering. The good results, yes, but why do those results matter? Because they feel good. It gives them some sort of pleasure, satisfaction, success, feeling of relief or control or empowerment. Those are the things that you really want to play up on. And if you can get other people to stoke those emotions, having an ad that just has words or, stock photography will only get you so far. It'll be even more powerful if it's, a quote from a customer, as you were saying earlier, or, on the floor video conversation with a partner or even an employee talking about how helping a customer achieve something made them feel. Those are all way better ways to play to the emotional side.
Okay, Leslie, what's one piece of advice that you would give to other marketing leaders?
Stop gating your content. Really, truly. I know this makes everybody very, very nervous because, oh my gosh, where am I going to get my leads? But here's the thing. Think about what your content was actually created to do. Did you create the content to generate leads? Your answer should be no. What you created the content for was to educate, inspire, and ultimately get people to want to change the way they think, thus elicit action. So give people the thing that will actually lead to them taking the action. Make it compelling and easy for them to take the action, either whilst consuming that content or after doing it. And this is true in any form of content. If you have a video, make sure that there's some sort of call to action after the fact. If you've got great long form content, put that content online in a way that people can scroll through it, can really pull out the highlights and the nuggets. And, if there are certain nuggets that are really compelling, have a little call to action off on the side that says, would you like to talk to somebody about, how to make this work for you, how to achieve this thing? Click here, we'll get you on the phone with an expert. There's lots of ways that you can remove friction from the process. And if your content is good and does its job, people will raise their hand. You will get that lead. But now they're going to be an informed lead. You're going to know that the conversation you're walking into is going to be informed by everything that you are able to influence through that content.
Okay, so I totally agree. I think that people need to gate their content way less. I am glad that you are singing it from the rooftops, and I wholeheartedly agree. Leslie, it's been wonderful having you on the show. For listeners, go check out Flexera. Go nudge your CIO, your IT department. And any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
Nothing to plug. Just really enjoyed this time. I love talking marketing with other marketers and brilliant people. And I hope that it drops some nuggets for people.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And we'll talk soon. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.